Hello, everyone. My name is Leonard, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here to Vincent's Club. It's an historic members club here in the centre of Oxford, which I'm a proud member for the second event in the series called The Journey of a Lifetime. This event is being recorded, and the video will be made available to watch online via our various social media platforms, which we'll tell you more about later. Let me tell you how the afternoon is going to go. In a minute, I'm going to introduce to you Jane and Perry Power. Jane will be interviewing Perry and getting him to tell his own story. So his journey of a lifetime as a child abuse survivor and how he helps others break the silence. And at the end of the interview, you have the opportunity to ask questions, take part in a meet and greet and book signing session, network and grab drinks at the bar. And so now I'd like to introduce to you Perry and Jane. Jane, who sat on my right hand side, is an expert in the field of conflict resolution, a trained mediator and a facilitator known to her clients as the Barefoot Mediator, author of two popular books, How to Beat Bedlam in the Bedroom and Boredom in the Bedroom, and Authority Guide to Conflict Resolution. She has spoken at the United Nations, the White House, and the EU Commission. Perry Power is an actor, writer, activist, and a coach. So on that note, I'll humbly hand over to Jane and Perry, and thank you.
Thank you, Leonard, and welcome to everybody here at St Vincent's Club here in Oxford and to our online audience. Welcome to the Journey of a Lifetime talk series, and this is the second of those journeys. The last 2 years have been the most extraordinary period, haven't they, of us all going through change, challenge and crisis. And how do we deal with that? Sometimes we need to support and encourage each other, and learning from others, and particularly people who have been through their own specific challenges, is one of the best ways to do that. So today it's my absolute pleasure to be interviewing and talking through his own journey, Perry Power. Welcome, Perry.
Thank you very much for having me. And hello everyone at home too.
So Perry, we've had a chat and I know your journey is quite an extraordinary one. So we're going to just start right from the beginning of your journey, your childhood. So tell us about your early childhood, your early years, and how your journey begins.
Yeah, so my first ever memory, I was about maybe 3 years old, and I was in the hallway. You know how sometimes we always have a memory and we don't really know why we have that memory, right? My memory was I was in the hallway, I was playing with, I think, cars. My dad had just shouted at me for God knows what reason. He goes into the kitchen, he's playing bad cop, and then my mum comes and sits down and playing good cop. That was my first memory. And the second memory was like a year later and she's walked out. So my mum's left, which just leaves me and my dad.
Yeah.
So he raised me as a single parent.
Wow.
A couple of years later, my stepmom came into the picture. They started dating, she moved in, and then they get married out in South Africa, and I was the best man. So my dad thought it was his day, and it really wasn't. It was definitely my day as a 9-year-old with the rings walking down the aisle.
Brilliant.
And yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll fast forward a little bit to when I was 11 years old, and I was at my nan's house. And for anybody who knows my story, the abuse was at my nan's house.
Yes.
And it was her husband. So it was my step-granddad. And now the abuse happened for about 1.5 years. I had no idea it was abuse. I thought it was the same way that my dad would give me a hug to show his form of love. That was my step-granddad's form of love. Because I didn't know what sexual abuse was on TV. I didn't know what any of that meant. So how would I know any different? And there was a time where I was sitting on his lap and we were watching TV. So imagine kind of like how me and you are, and there's a coffee table in the middle. my stepmom, my stepmom watching TV, and my step-granddad sitting on his lap watching TV. And there's a blanket over us, and she notices something happening. So she then leaves the living room, and then she calls me out, like, Perry. So I'll go into the kitchen, and then she didn't want to question me, because at that time she didn't really know, she wasn't my mother, so she didn't want to enforce that onto me. She goes, I'm going to take you home, your dad can talk to you about it. And I go home, my dad questions me, and then I tell him about what was happening. And my dad was extremely angry, frustrated, and he said to me, right, well, keep this at home. I was like, keep this at home, don't go to school, tell your teachers, don't go tell your friends, don't go tell your mother. I want you to keep this at home between the four walls of this house. But at that time, I still didn't know what on earth he was talking about. He became the villain of my story because he was stopping me from having a relationship with my step-granddad now.
Yes.
You know, so that then started really what ended up being a 12-year silence.
So 12 years of silence. So you've described your mother leaving the family, your stepmom coming in, and then this abuse, and then this long period of having to be silent and cover up what was going on.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, I think it was when I was 11 is when it stopped.
Yes.
And I think, for the first couple of years, I still didn't know what on earth was going on, really.
Yes.
My body did.
Yes.
If you know much about trauma, your body keeps a score on trauma. My body knew what was going on, but I didn't know. My conscience didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So, but then as I started to go throughout school, and I started to have friends, social life, then sexual abuse started to be a thing on the TVs a little bit, started to be in conversations amongst families a little bit, and then I was like, oh, okay, now I know what was going on, and now I know all the different scenes between me and my step-granddad, the things that he would do to me, and I'm like, okay, that was wrong. All those times was wrong. The times he would take me down to the pub and make me drink his Guinness, allow me to drink his Guinness, and that's our little secret. Things like that, and all these different episodes are forms of grooming to allow me to then be in the scenes where it's a bit more, invading my privacy. But then as soon as I was then confronted by those realizations, that's when the demons started to grow inside my head, because then I'm like, okay, but why did I stay silent for 1.5 years? Why did I tell my mum that I enjoyed it? And then I was like, what a sick child. And then I started to really beat myself up. And then which is ultimately what it comes down to, is all those things is wrapped under the world of shame. And that really enforces silence, because I'm like, if I sit here and I tell somebody, are they going to mirror that shame? Right? And they're going to say, well, yeah, you did enjoy it, obviously, or whatever it is. And that is what really enforced that silence, and that's what I think it took me a lot in and up to break it.
So it's a very powerful word there, Perry, shame. You were carrying that shame, and also demons. You're talking about demons in your mind growing. How long did that period go on for, of the shame and the demons?
For quite a few years. I think so I grew up in London, and I was this boy who really was the identity of this boy who was abused. So I didn't have that much confidence to make friends. I didn't have any luck with girls. I was a 16-year-old, virgin, but I'm a 16-year-old boy who didn't want to be a virgin, right? So I'm hanging around with all these lads, who knows if they were telling the truth or not, who, and I'm like, oh, okay, but that's not me. But how can that be me? I can't allow myself to take that step. Then, so my step-granddad, the abuser, he passed away about 2 years after the abuse stopped. He died at work from a heart attack. About 2 to 3 years after that, my nan passed away. So my dad then sold the house. We moved out of London. Now I remember, I was like, right, I want to go to this new college. I'm going to Bracknell College. Nobody there knows me. So I'm going to create, like an actor, I'm going to create this new character, Perry Power 2.0. And I was like, right, when I go to this college, I'm going to be the guy who doesn't give a shit about anything. He slept with loads of girls, right? He's the man. Because that was who I wanted to be in my head, because I was so far from it. So then I go to the college and I start becoming that person. I started to fake it until I made it. And but then I ended up getting a girlfriend. And then but I knew what was going on. I knew that I was acting. I knew that I was playing a part of somebody who I didn't really want to be, because it wasn't my true self. And that's when the demons started to get really, really loud.
So you created then a new identity for yourself, the new Perry. but it still wasn't you.
No,
Yeah.
and I think no matter how many times or how hard we try to be someone we're not, we know who we are. And the longer that we live not as our true self, what does that do? It creates a world where really it's false. The relationships are false.
Yes.
You know, the everything is false because it's going to be false because who we are being is false.
Yes. So what was the next step in your journey then, Perry?
The next step was Lewis Howes.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of Lewis Howes. Yeah, he brought out a book called The Mask of Masculinity.
Yes.
And I remember I was sitting at home and he is doing his promotional tour for his book. And he was on the Ellen DeGeneres show. She's like, oh, well, why did you write the book? And he goes, well, because I was abused as a boy and then I grew up wearing all these different types of masks. And I was like, wow, he articulated it in a way that basically showed what I did. So I was like, okay, well, how can I rip this mask off? I was thinking, how can I do it? And then I was like, well, I'm going to wait for my girlfriend to come home from work.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell her, we're going to go for a walk, and I'm going to tell her, listen, the guy who you started dating wasn't this big player. He was somebody who was faking it because he was abused as a kid. And that, for me, was the very first time I broke my silence. And I tell you what, it's, like, what is vulnerability? It's like walking out in the street stark naked. That's what vulnerability is.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah.
And I was like, she may leave me. But I was like, well, I have to do this even if she does leave me because I can't control her actions. I'm doing this for me. I need to do this. I need to get rid of the monkey on my back. I just need to let this out. And that was the first time I broke my silence, and she welcomed me with open arms, which I'm very fortunate for. And that became really the sort of slow journey of breaking the silence even more and more.
So you took off your mask and you became vulnerable, and you let someone into that world. You broke the silence.
Mm-hmm.
But what did you decide to do next? Because that was just one instance, but I know that was a journey of breaking the silence as well then, wasn't it?
That was, yeah. I think at the time I was a online fitness coach, and I went to a mastermind event. It was like a business event, very intimate. There was like maybe 5, 6, 7 other entrepreneurial people there. And I was there, and it was literally just half a circle. And I'm like, right, guys, I want to go around the room and introduce yourself. And everyone's like, hey, my name's Jack. I've got 3 dogs, and I'm, like to drink beer on a Sunday and train my clients during the week. Comes around to me, I'm like, hi, my name's Perry. I was sexually abused as a kid. I'm like, what are you doing, right? Why did you just do that? You know what I mean? But I was like, I couldn't control anything. I was literally like this, and I was staring at the floor. Everybody was around me, and I just spoke about it.
Yeah.
And then I sort of sat back, and I thought to look up at the coaches, and I look up at them, and they just look at each other. Then they look at me like, okay, we need to introduce you to somebody. That's what they said to me. I was like, okay. And then we had a break, and then the people came around to me, and one of the girls gave me a hug and said, thank you for sharing that. And that was another time where it just flowed through me. I didn't control it. I didn't feel like I was controlling it. And driving back from that mastermind event, I was there for about 4 or 5 days, and I remember it's like when you surround yourself with people who are where you want to be, they expand your bubble of, we all live in a bubble, which is our comfort zone. And if you surround yourself with people who are outside your comfort zone, they're going to expand it, right? But then if you leave them, the longer you leave them, your bubble's going to shrink back to usually to what it was. So I'm driving home from the event, and I feel my bubble's big. I'm like, I need to say it again, but I don't want to tell every Tom, Dick, and Harry. I want to tell the world, right?
Yes.
I just want to get out once, and then that's it. I was like, once, right now, and I'm not thinking of like the vision or where this is going to go. I'm like, I want to out once. That's it. Job done. I'm driving home. I'm like, okay, when I get home, I'll do it. Driving, I'm like, no, you won't do it. Because as soon as you get home, back into your comfort zone, you're going to sell yourself a story as to why you shouldn't do it, because you've already done it. People don't need to go onto Facebook and hear your story. Mm-hmm. And this was about maybe 4 years ago. And I'm like, right, pull my car over to the side of the road. And literally in the side of the road, got my phone out, 7 takes. First time I'm crying. I'm like, nobody wants to see me cry. Second time, crying. Nobody wants to see me cry. Third time, I'm like, bro, come on. And then I'm like, all right, just do it. And then I kept on stuttering. And I'm like, you just need to do it. So the 7th take, I put it onto Facebook, and I put my phone down, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, right, you need to delete the video. So I go onto Facebook, I hit the go to delete button, and I just throw my phone in the back of the car, right? I override that thought with action. I throw the phone to the back of the car, and I just start driving. I'm like, just when you get home, then you can delete it. I get home, look at the phone, and then it just blew up, and then people just supportive comments and DMs, and that's when I realized there's other people out there who've been through it too.
Yes. And I didn't know that when we spoke before, that you'd done it there and then in the car, like pulled over, made your video, and so there's something about seizing the moment, isn't there?
There is.
Something about seizing the moment.
I think because our mind can really not make us do things a lot of the time.
Yes.
But if we force ourselves into action, then that can override the thought that you once had.
Yeah.
And create new thoughts, because now you just create this new situation that you're in.
So I got two things from that you just said. You know, you found these people who expanded your vision, your zone of confidence, and then you seized the moment and did this video.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then what happened next? Because then you do go on with this message, don't you? And it's breaking the silence.
I do. Now, I think what I've left out so far is that in between that, my dad passed away, right? And so my dad, as I said, he raised me, and I was his, like, he really sort of cottonwooled me throughout life, because he was brought up by alcoholic parents that really just didn't care about him. So he would be the one cooking the house, cleaning the house, and doing everything whilst his parents are at the pub drinking. They come home, all they need is food on the table, they don't care about him. So he did the opposite to me, right? But sometimes it's a bit much. But then I left home because of that, and I can't deal with this anymore. You know, I'm 18, right, I'm off traveling. See you later. Came back from traveling, I'm gonna rent a place, I'm not going back home. And then that really took a toll on him. But I knew, but at that point he was an alcoholic, but I didn't know he was a raging alcoholic. I just knew that he just drank a hell of a lot. And he was able to mask it, because I would have to fill up the vodka bottles with water, put it back in the cupboard so my stepmom wouldn't find out. And when I came back, the drinking got more and it got more and it got more. And he would come around my house, and he's just had an argument with mum, and he's drunk, so he's drink driving, and it was all the time. And then I ended up texting him when he left. I was like, why are you drinking so much? And he goes, to fight away the demons. I didn't even know demons, you know, demons for me was like supernatural, you know, best TV show in the world. If anyone watches that, if you don't, you need to watch it. But yeah, but demons for me was like something from that. I didn't know what demons were in here until he texted me saying to fight away the demons. Yes. And I was like, what does that mean? You know, and then June the 1st, 2017, I get 2 picture messages from my brother. One with my dad on a bed with paramedics standing next to him, the other one with an ambulance van outside the house. So I call him up, I'm like, what's happened? And then the mum was like, they just had to come around to even out his blood levels, put him back in the ambulance, take him to the hospital, even him back out. Because he became a diabetic. So he's an alcoholic, became a diabetic, had high blood pressure, and then they put him in the back of the ambulance, and he had a heart attack in the back of the ambulance van. He didn't make it to the hospital, and he was 48 years old. And that was tough. And then what then ended up happening was, when I did that video that I mentioned about, put it on Facebook, go around to my auntie's house. Well, first I go around to my stepmom's house. She then tells me that I didn't know that the sexual abuse happened for over a year. I was like, what do you mean? She goes, I thought it just happened that time that I caught it. You didn't tell us that it went on. So I was like, that's an interesting decision I made as a kid, to not say anything else. But it happened for about 1.5 years. And then I go around to my auntie's house, and then she proceeds to tell me, she goes, no, it wasn't just you who was abused by him. I said, who else? She goes, it was you, your cousin Kelly, me, and your dad. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. My dad was abused, made sense that why he made me shut up every time I would bring it up, made sense why he became an alcoholic. And the fact that he lived and died in silence became my reason not to and to help other people not go down the same road.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with everybody, Perry. That's, clearly it has been a journey for you to be able to tell that story. But where do you go from there? Because I think what you've done now is develop this into a way to help other people, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, it's just been a continuous of how can I get this message out to more people? Because yeah, you got people on Facebook, and then you have to be consistent with a message on Facebook. Okay, well, where else are people? And that was this thing, this sort of thought process I had. I was like, okay, well, TikTok is new. This is years ago. TikTok is new. Go on there, 12-year-olds dancing on the street and whatever it was. I was like, okay, they don't want to hear my message. I was like, actually, wait, maybe they don't want to hear it, but do they need to hear the message? So I put my story out on there, and then boom, it went viral. My following went from 0 to 120,000 fairly quickly. And then I was just absolutely amazed, because before I was speaking to adults who have lived in silence for 25 years, for example. Now I was speaking to 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who is happening to now. And that was a different ballgame. And that then gave me the idea to then launch a charity, which I launched it with somebody, she lives in America. So she was able to get the ball rolling first. So that charity is registered in America as We Rescue Kids. So what we do is when we get referrals from whether it's parents or organizations, and they've got kids who have been sex trafficked or come from abuse homes, they send them to us and we give them therapy with child licensed therapists. So that gave me that idea. And then I was like, right, what's next? And then I was like, well, I like writing, but I didn't really think of anything. And I'm watching the Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know if you've seen so Jeffrey Epstein documentary. I was 2 episodes into that, and there was this woman crying who was a victim of Jeffrey's, and she was saying about how she's living in silence. And when she said those words, I was like, light bulb. And I was like, okay, I know what my book's going to be about. It's going to be about breaking the silence.
Yep.
And then that's a book that I wrote, and I wrote that in about 30 days, just under, and I got that out, and and that's been crazy. That book is funny because I sat on that book for a year after I'd done it because of just perfectionism. I was like, it has to be perfect. I was like, but it won't be perfect, so I didn't put it out. A year later, I was like, right, you're gonna put it out anyway. Like, just put the book out. So I ended up doing it, and then it's just it became a bestseller on Amazon. Got me a TEDx talk, which is about my message of breaking the silence. And it's also led to a producer reaching out to me from LA who wants to help me turn my story in the book into a movie, feature film.
Into a movie.
Yeah.
So what an extraordinary journey, Perry. But one of the things I think was most important when we spoke before was the difference between you helping people or breaking the silence for your own. So there was a difference between you reacting or doing what you did from a place of pain and then from a place of purpose and power. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's I speak to a lot of people on this journey who want to, whether they want to help other people, whether it's from a coaching aspect or they want to speak to other people or they want to write a book, whatever it is. And I speak, there's a portion of them who are very much in pain, like heavily in pain. And I feel like that when you're in a world of pain, it's very hard to communicate a message of inspiration or of power because you can't fully merge into that language. When you can have pain, right? And you can have pain. Like, I'm so pissed about what happened, and and there is a part of me that hasn't moved on yet, but there's also quite a few parts of me that has been able to move on. That's okay, right? Because it's very powerful to communicate pain through a message. Because everybody knows pain. Everybody in this room knows what pain is. We're all living with some form of pain right now, right? So if we can make that a connective tissue, then we can able to move forward with that message. And for me, when I broke my silence to my girlfriend, that was pure from pain. There was no purpose, there was no power there. That was just for me. When I then did it again at the mastermind, that was from pain. Nobody else was in my mind about doing it. When I did the video, that was kind of like a half and half. It's like, I'm still in pain, but I want to get it out. Otherwise, it obviously needs to impact people, and that needed to be an objective. Otherwise, why would I have done it? So that was like where I was making that transition. Then when I made that transition and I saw a response, then I found out about my dad. That was like, okay, there's pain there still because I'm pissed that my dad lived in silence. I'm pissed that he remained an alcoholic, but I know why. There's reasons. And I think as human beings, we all we crave understanding, and if we don't understand, then that just turns us into this world where we're like, there's so many questions without answers, right? But if we can try to gain understanding, which is what comes down to forgiveness, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, then we're able to move forward with inspiration.
And I know from some of the work that I've done as a mediator, certainly in areas where people have been injured or hurt as a result of someone else's actions, one of the driving forces is I don't want this to happen to anybody else, or I don't want other people to have to live in silence. So that is a powerful, very powerful motive, isn't it?
Yeah, because you can relate. You know what it feels like to be living in silence. You know what it feels like to be abused. You know what it feels like to go through violence. You know what it feels like to have your space invaded, to lose trust, to be groomed, or whatever it is. So it's like, well, do I want this 12-year-old child to go through it? Do I want that 44-year-old man to go through it? Or the 72-year-old woman to still be living in silence? No. So, and that is a huge driving force to be continuous with a message every day.
So the other thing we've spoken a lot about, Perry, is, finding vision, finding that purpose and vision, finding people to inspire you to be the best that you can be and to take your message out into the world. Tell us about your inspiration. Who's inspired you?
Who's inspired me in my journey? I would say from a kid, it's been The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Everybody knows him. Because of I used to wear his belts and people's eyebrow with the glasses, and all that jazz from a kid. And he used to be my number one guy as a wrestler. Then as I grew up and I wanted to be an actor, and then going into the world of business, then I see Dwayne Johnson make a transition from wrestling to then going into the world of movies, being pushed back by producers because you're too big for movies. You can only play one type of character. And he's like, you can't tell me. Fine, I'll make my own movies. I build my own production company, 7 Bucks Productions, and I'll do my own films. Then go into the business world and have like Terramana Tequila, which is worth like nearly $4 billion. And he came from nothing. Yeah. So he's one of my biggest inspirations for sure. And then you have someone his name is always out on Weintraub. Bob Proctor.
Bob Proctor, you talked about.
Yeah, Bob Proctor. He, I think that if anybody likes meditating and maybe you struggle to get to sleep, Bob Proctor has this meditation on YouTube called, if you just type in sleeping meditation abundance, he has an abundance one, and basically his whole message is whatever you visualize it inside your mind, you can manifest into the material world. And everything, this table to the mic to that glass, all started as an idea. That's how they exist. So it's like, well, if my idea can then turn it into a physical object like this glass, why can't it be the same thing for the dreams that I had as a kid that I seem to have lost in touch with now as an adult? Why can't I bring those into the present and make them a reality? So, and that's what Bob Proctor's all about.
So Bob Proctor's really inspired you, and of course when you did that video in the car, that was from a vision, wasn't it? It was, I've got a vision and I'm going to go and do it, and you did, so it's just taking that onto another scale.
And then forgiveness, Perry, where does that fit into your story and how you're able to move beyond what's happened to you?
I think forgiveness is probably the hardest part for anybody who's been through abuse. You have a big portion of people that will look at me in the face and say, Perry, I'm not finding forgiveness, I don't need to. I'm like, okay, I'm not telling you that you need to, but I will share with you with my experience and from people who found forgiveness, and is that I think people confuse forgiveness with, if you look at forgiveness, it's the abuser, i.e. if I find forgiveness, I'm letting him or her off the hook. Okay, well they abused me for 6 years and I forgive them. What does that make me? Does that make me worthless? Because now I forgive them, I'm just a pushover. It's got nothing to do with them. But I found that out. If we go back to the mastermind where the coach said we need to introduce you to somebody, they introduced me to some guy who had to find forgiveness with his dad who died. And he wasn't able to have a conversation with his dad before the death. And he had to find forgiveness there. So I was like, okay, well I'm going to find forgiveness with my dad, then I'm going to find forgiveness with the abuser. It started with forgiving myself, that's the most important thing. I forgave myself for not speaking out. I forgave myself for, like the words, telling my mum that I enjoyed it. I forgave myself for, because this is the thing with abuse, they are sexual acts. So there will be an element of enjoyment in there, right? It just is. And I've spoken to many survivors who have told me their own accounts in relating to this. But it's like, but as soon as we acknowledge that, then boom, it's like, how could I enjoy that? Right? Even if it was 1%, why is that 1% still there? And so it's about finding forgiveness with myself for that, And then I still couldn't move on though. If I look at a picture of my nan, I think of my step granddad, and then my blood boils. I was like, this can't happen. This can't continue. So it was about finding forgiveness for my step granddad. I was like, okay, well, how can I find forgiveness? And that comes down to trying to seek an understanding. You know, if you can try to understand, and again, people confuse it. Well, okay, so for example, my step granddad, I ended up finding out that he grew up in a Catholic boarding school in Ireland called the St. Joseph's Industrial School, and that school in Cork in Ireland is listed at the end of the Spotlight movie, right, as one of the places where there was cases of priests molesting the kids. So him and his brother grew up in that environment, being raped and abused by the priests there. That helped me gain understanding. Does that mean, okay, well, what he then went on to do to us is fine? Well, no, because he could have picked a different path. I don't go out there and abuse kids. I don't go and abuse anyone, because I chose a different path, and my step granddad didn't. And it's like, well, if he was still alive today, I would just hope that he seeks some type of help, whether that's in prison or out, you know, whether he served his time and he's out, is he seeking help, whatever it is, right? But to heal those wounds from him so he doesn't go out and do it to any more people, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. So for me to it's like if you've got a puzzle and you throw it onto the table and you've got all these mixed pieces, you can't see that picture, and that drives you crazy, right? So, but you need to put all those pieces together to see that picture, and then you get some type of, okay, you know? And that is the best way I can describe forgiveness, because when you're able to do that, that is what power is.
Yes.
That is what worth is.
Yeah.
You know, and when you find your worth, nobody on the planet can make you feel worthless anymore. It's impossible, because you know what your worth is. So, and that's what letting go is. And when I was able to do that, what happened? I released my book, and who do I get a message from? My step granddad's 2 daughters, who I hadn't ever spoke to my entire life, right? And I was like, oh, why are they messaging me? Are they gonna take me to court because I'm talking about a member of the family and I haven't sought permission, or, you know, I'm lying in their eyes? But no, they tell me that he abused all them too. So I met up with them in London. They purchased my book. They read a book about their own dad, and they said, you've got the full support of our entire family with what you're doing. And that made me realize, okay, so trauma, abuse within a family, a lot of the times in my experience is generational. You know, and that generational trauma, that generational cycle needs to be stopped so it doesn't continue to be generational, and you create these new generations within a family who are healed and doesn't continue abuse.
That is one of the most powerful things about your story, I think, Perry, and I'm sure many people will relate to that, is being able to stop this cycle, being able to stop the generational cycle. It's a very, very powerful motive, but also outcome as well.
It is, and there has been legit studies on generational trauma being passed down.
Yeah.
Like legit studies on the fact that if for example, if a mum has kids and she hasn't healed her wounds and she's still living in a world of pain, and as we know, trauma does manifest within a body, that there are elements that does get passed down to the kids, right? And that had countless studies that showed that, which is why it's not just abuse. The mum doesn't need to abuse the kids, but there are some, you know, elements of that aftermath that gets passed through.
So Perry, what's next for you? What's next for Perry? Where are you going on to now?
Where am I going next? Okay, so I'm in the process of setting up my UK charity.
Yes.
Which is the Andy Project.
Yes. And
that is for male survivors of childhood sexual abuse, to give them the support system that they need. And the Andy Project, named after my dad. So that's in the works. Then we got the movie, which is a very, very slow burner, but it will get there. And we got just trying to do as many things like interviews, press as possible, to get the message out, to do more things around, because I have this element which I want to quickly share about breaking the silence. What I learned is that when I broke my silence to my girlfriend at the time, if she didn't accept me and give me the response that I wanted, that would have set me into a deeper, longer, dark place of silence, probably forever, because now I associate rejection with my story, with my truth.
Yes.
Right? So now what I preach out there is, when it comes to breaking your silence, don't tell somebody on that first step. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's your lover, your parent, your brother, whoever it is. I want you to instead make it step number 22, for example, and the first 21 steps, I want you to break the silence to yourself in as many different ways as possible. whether it's writing a poem, telling yourself in the mirror, whether it is painting a piece of art, whether it's it's endless, choreographing a dance piece. Doesn't matter what it is. What it ultimately comes down to is allowing the emotions that you've had trapped in you for so long to be expressed within a form, within a method, because vocally telling somebody is just one form of communication. There's so many others. So if you can release that out, every single time you do that to yourself, you're taking ownership over your story. You're believing your own truth. And then once you've done that to a certain point where you're like, I know what happened. Yeah, I own that. Okay, now I'm gonna tell you, if you say you're lying, I know I'm not lying. That sounds like a you problem, right? Or why are you saying that? Whatever it is. You're able to deflect that more easily than if I had been living in silence for 17 years and I decided to break my silence to you for the very first time.
That's very powerful, Perry, to tell the story to yourself first. But is it also important to find the right person when you do?
Yes, when it comes to it.
Yeah.
For sure. It does come down to finding the right person. There is an element of it where it's like, which makes that method more powerful, because I've had many people tell me like they would tell their husband or they would tell their wife. They didn't give them, they don't necessarily have to say, I don't believe you. They can believe you, but if they don't know how to deal with emotions, or their form of given love isn't the way that you want to receive it, just 2 seconds of their reaction has to be off for that to trigger you. So it's like, so sometimes even finding the right person on step 1 could not be enough, but on step 22, still try to find the right person, and hopefully it goes your way. But if there is a small chance that it doesn't, then you're able to handle that a lot better.
So, Perry, do you have some sort of final words? And I love this idea of the 21 steps or whatever. I don't know if it's a formal thing, whether you've actually got 21 steps that you. I think you should write it out after today. That we should write 21 steps, and it should be a blueprint or something for people. I think that's just so. It is very powerful and a wonderful thing. But do you have a last message or some last words you'd like to give to people as a
I think it's going to be an idea around what I want my next book to be about, and it's about thriving after abuse. I think a lot of people struggle to live a quote unquote normal life the same as somebody else who hasn't been through the same times, but it's also around owning your story. Like Tony Robbins says a lot, change your story, change your life. And I feel like that is that's true, that works. But what I find with people who've been through abuse is they tend to try to run away from their story, to try to sort of change that element of their story, i.e. change that story so they can become somebody else. Well, I'm like, well, first of all, you need to own your story. You need to take ownership over what happened, because if you don't own your story, you're not owning your life. But if you can own your story, then what happens? You can take ownership over your life. And that for me has been the most powerful thing. Hence why I'm able to do things like this, because I've owned my story. I haven't tried to change it, haven't tried to dish that onto somebody else. I'm confidently owning my story. I'm not going to say I'm proud with what I went through, but I believe that I went through that to serve the purpose that I have today, and that all falls under taking ownership.
And the point of this series is that everybody has been through their own journey. It may not have been as traumatic as yours, but I think the tips and the tools that you're giving us are important for everybody to own their journey, to find their power, to find their story, and to know what that gives them. So I thank you very much. I know we're going to open up to audience questions now, and then I know George is going to say something shortly, and then we're going to be able to do a book signing with you as well.
Thank you once again, Perry and Jane. Perry, for such a powerful story, and I'm sure it's made us all kind of reflect on our own personal lives and the decisions that we need to make, especially breaking the silence, because we could be saving other people's lives and also breaking that kind of generational cycle of things that shouldn't be happening within families. So thank you for such a powerful story. Before we get into the meet and greet and kind of networking session, I just like to introduce George Najeme. So he's pretty much the person behind this series. We started off with his story, and he's also recording artist, songwriter, filmmaker, and obviously this event, the Journey of a Lifetime. He's also part of this hip hop team, co-created this hip hop team and clothing brand named Tawau, and the director and producer of short film Journey of a Lifetime. So I'm just now going to hand over to George to say a few words.
Thank you all so much for coming out this afternoon for our second episode of The Journey of a Lifetime talk show. Please give a round of applause for Perry and Jane. Thank you so much, Perry, for coming on. You're an extraordinary man, and you do a great job. We thank you so much. Thank you, Jane, for a wonderful interview. So just a bit about The Journey of a Lifetime. As you've experienced today, the Journey of a Lifetime is a talk show that creates awareness for mental health, trauma, and gives that platform where discussions can be made. We're going to carry on making more episodes. So if you want to, stay in touch, you can follow us on Instagram. It's the_journey of a lifetime on Instagram. Or alternatively, you can follow me on Instagram as well. It's Tawal Music, TAWAL Music. We'll keep you informed on the upcoming episodes. Thank you so much, honestly. So Perry's going to be doing a book signing downstairs where there's a bar as well. We can meet and greet. Thank you for being an amazing audience for our second episode. Can you please give yourselves a round of applause for attending? So thank you for attending the Journey of a Lifetime talk show, episode 2. We're now going to go over to the live music segment at Elements.
Survival of the fittest, God be my witness. Survival is vital, hand on the Bible. Try more, gotta strive more, what you crying for? Try more, gotta fight more to the sky for. Survival of the fittest, God be my witness. Survival is vital, hand on the Bible. Try more, gotta strive more, what you crying for? Try more, gotta fight more to the sky for. Marching through the battlefield, standing as a rat to build. Legs getting weak, feel like I need to get a cattle killed for a sacrifice.